Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us here on Digging Deep, an Okie 811 podcast. I am MG Govia, Education Outreach Liaison for Okie 811 and the host, and I am lucky enough today to be joined by Cahill with Common Ground Alliance, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We're going to do a deep dive into the history of CGA, some best practices that are out there, some big national overlook of what 811 is, and just some personal stories along the years. Kelly and I have known each other for a few years, and I'm looking forward to sharing that networking and getting more people involved in damage prevention through our networks. So let's start with just a quick introduction. Kelly, for those who do not know the celebrity that you are, will you let them know a little bit about yourself?
Flattery will get you everywhere with me. I am Kelly Cahill, CGA's Communications Director. I've been in this role for about a year and a half now, but I have been working with CGA on their communications and marketing for about 13 years, and several 811 centers as well prior to my time at CGA.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math on when you and I first met, and I think it is right as I came into this role, which was like 6 years ago. And so you've always been one of the mentors I look up to, not only just because of your role on the national level, but you've always had really brilliant ideas and someone that I can give great feedback on. So, and from. So thank you for all your help throughout the years. And it's my pleasure to have you on as our guest today. So I'm excited about this.
Me too. And I would say vice versa, MG. For example, I think the 811 centers are such kind of how we talk, or not we, but in politics, they sort of say the states are the laboratories of democracy. I think the 811 centers are sort of the laboratories of innovation in a lot of ways for our damage prevention industry, and things like podcasts and some of the other cool 811 Okie beer and things like that. Some of those innovative pathways to getting our message out there are really awesome. So it's great to collaborate again.
Oh, that's a good point. I never really thought of it that way because I get kind of, I don't know, I kind of hoard all these good ideas that we've done over the couple of years, and I'm like, yeah, they're all mine, but I never really thought of it as a state thing until, for instance, this is going to be published after the fact, but I'm going to be speaking in Kentucky next week, and Kentucky 811's Damage Prevention Summit, and they went and had a beer contract brewed as well, and their beer is called Can You Dig It is the name of it. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how they pulled off one of our Okie's marketing tools as well, and see just how it worked out for them and stuff. So I'm really proud of them for seeing an opportunity and acting on it, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, can't hold a good idea back.
Nah, but that being said, I steal from other 811s too. I just try to pretend it's all mine. But yeah. So when it comes to your history with CGA, if I remember correctly, you were hired into your role. You haven't promoted this way up, right? The role you've had has been there for the last 6 years, right? Or 11?
There was no communications director. It was a new role when I joined. So CGA has grown quite a bit in general. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the whole history of CGA, but in the last 2 to 3 years, CGA has gone from a handful of staff to 14 folks. So a lot of movement in our organization. I think it's made us a lot better at being able to service our members. The improvements we're making in our damage information reporting tool platform, and all of our kind of visual tools for folks to share data and information about reducing damages is all leveling up. What we're able to do with the Damage Prevention Institute is also really exciting. But yes, with a completely new role.
That is awesome. And thank you for giving all the teasers that we need. So everybody kind of have an idea of what we're about to be talking about with some of the things you just talked about. So let's start with the history. Let's go back to the beginning of CGA and what it looked like back then and how far we've come.
Yeah. So the Department of Transportation issued a Common Ground study in the late 90s. And as a result of some of the findings of that study, the Common Ground Alliance was formed, partially through a contract with the Department of Transportation's Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, as we affectionately know it, in the damage prevention world. So the year 2000 is when CGA was officially established. There are some of my current colleagues who were around at that time, and many folks who you and I know and see a few times a year at CGA events or at regional 811 conferences are still involved in this industry, which is, I think, a remarkable testament to the passion that you and I know, I mean, that you and I both have, obviously, and that you and I know it's just a special breed of person that gets really deep into damage prevention. But all that to say, one of the biggest findings from that study was the need for a single phone number that folks could use within a state or across state lines to get buried utility lines marked. And so as a result, the members who form CGA, which are, 16 different stakeholder groups, quite a diverse range of folks, as you also know that we've got involved, came together to work with the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, on designating 811 as the US's official call before you dig one call number in 2007. So that was a huge boon for the industry. And between 2007 and 2017, so the first 10 years that 811 was available across the country, we saw damages decrease by 50%. So you can see kind of over that, from that study to the implementation of 811 and a bunch of other things, right? Common Ground Alliance best practices and the work of so many folks across the country. That was a huge impact on damage that we were able to make working all together with this shared responsibility model. We've had a bit of stagnation since then. So a lot of work and a lot of innovation, a lot of unsiloing that, from my view, we need to do as an industry to get to that next big reduction, which of course, CGA's 50 and 5 initiative is aiming to inspire us to get to.
Yeah, so the 50 and 5 was launched this year at CGA, and I was interviewed on another podcast and asked about my view of the 50 and 5, and I love it. Obviously, my goal is 100% right, better than we have been, but that's just the passion side of it. I think honestly that 50 is feasible. What I think, I can't remember if I had this conversation with you, it's just the technology on the excavation side has also exponentially gotten better and better and faster. And so being ahead of them with the 811 process, being able to get lines located faster and more accurately and efficiently and all these things needs to happen while they still have faith in the 811 system. And I think there for a couple of years that stagnation was the late locates and the issues that were happening within the process. And Oklahoma, I think, this is me just being in the field, we haven't had the struggles that some of the other states have had as far as people losing faith in the system. But I do know nationwide that we've heard some of groanings of that. But now, if we can put the excavator first and show them that this is the service that we're providing to them, instead of them thinking that's a service to protect the underground facilities. I think just that little switch has helped a lot in seeing that faith being restored. So that's something that we've been really working on in Oklahoma, is just have faith in the system. It's not perfect, but it's a start, and it's the best option that's out there, and without going heavy-handed with the law and the legal aspects of it.
That's such a great point about excavators as part of a stakeholder category. And as we look at CGA's evolution over the last 24 years, that excavator portion of our membership has increased exponentially, and particularly in the last couple of years as a result of our acquisition of another association at the beginning of 2023. And it is such a success story for our industry, and having the input of excavators into dirt, into our committees that are producing tools and deciding or helping us think about how we analyze data to more effectively reduce damages. That perspective for me personally as a communicator in damage prevention has been invaluable. I'm really thrilled to see it. And data is the bottom line, I think. For data and technology are really where we need to put our focus as an industry, but the quality of that data needs to be high as well. And I'm thrilled that excavators were our largest submitting stakeholder group for dirt data last year, and will be again this year.
That is.
But the more data we can get, the better.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about dirt and how that report works?
Absolutely. So DIRT stands for the Damage Information Reporting Tool, and it is the backbone of Common Ground Alliance's work, and all of our nearly 4,200 members, because it tells us what's going wrong and helps us target interventions, tools, messages to be strategic in reducing that number of damages, which is hundreds of thousands every year. So it's a lot. Right. It's a lot that we have to work on. And so we do need to be strategic about it. The way that DIRT works is that anybody can anonymously and voluntarily submit damage and near miss data, which is also its own interesting category of information to look at. To our DIRT tool. We collect it on an annual basis, and we, along with our data reporting and evaluation committee, analyze that data and produce a report every year. Sometimes we also produce interim reports. We just released one that, to your point earlier about our myriad locating issues, right. Timeliness, accuracy. We just released a DIRT special report that looked at locating issues specifically. But we produce that report each year. It has pretty strong, increasingly strong recommendations for what the industry needs to do. And also it increasingly looks at how many of our damages are in the same 5 or 6 root causes year after year. So you and I, I'm sure, know that no notification, as always, is at the top of that list. It's the biggest bucket. It's reduced a bit over the last decade, but we can do a lot of work there. But also locating makes up a significant portion of that, and failure to pothole, failure to maintain clearance are our 2 big excavation issues. So really looking at those top 6, which make up 76% of all damages, is something that DIRT has helped us kind of refine our viewpoint on.
One thing that we glean from the DIRT report is what you said about the no locates. In case anybody forgot my title, it's education and outreach. And so when that outreach is being affected, and I'm seeing, this many people have damages without a call or locate, that just drives me crazy, because I'm like, we're putting the effort in. I know that we are, from billboards to television, to radio, to social media, to our website, and then every locator truck has the 811 number on it. All these things, we're doing everything we can. But what I'm seeing in the field, and I don't see how the DIRT data could back this up in any way. It's not a causation, it's a correlation, right? When I go and I speak to excavators, it's their one-offs. It's like I call 90% of the time or 80% of the time. It's just that I got frustrated. I knew this project needed to start earlier than the 3 days that you asked for, or I need to get going yesterday because I have a boss that's mad at me, or whatever the case may be. And it's always that one moment where, like, I know what the right thing is to do, but I need to do this now. And I wish there was a way, like, the magic wand to anything is, if you use it most of the time, why can't I get you to use it all the time?
Yeah. It's such a common story, unfortunately. And even in some of the fatalities that we've seen, have been folks who have been regular users of the 811 system and, just as you articulated. Just this time, I really needed to get it done. It's definitely a big part of what informed our new 811 tagline that CGA released last year, which is safety is in your hands, every dig, every time. That consistent, effective use of 811 message is huge, but it's also a behavior change for a lot of folks. Yeah. And that's tough to accomplish in any industry. I'm excited about some of the behavioral research that CGA is doing with George Mason University in Virginia, where we're based, to kind of look at how do we get folks who have sort of a normalized deviance, which we heard a little bit about at the keynote at CGA conference this past April in Colorado. You know, it's sort of like not wearing a seatbelt, and I've never been in a car crash, so I'm used to being able to take this risk and it not impacting me, but it's simply not worth it, right? For that one time that is gonna, change your life, or God forbid somebody else's life also. It's a tough nut to crack, but I think we are working on it. I'm excited about a few different ways we're working on it. Have you seen any of the influencer content that CGA's education committee has worked on?
Not yet, but I want to. That's definitely an avenue that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I'm going to recruit you for that task team after we jump off here. But our education committee obviously does a lot of similar work to yourself, and they have been focusing on this new channel for speaking to excavators, and the kind of strategy behind it is, can we use really authentic voices to say exactly what you and I have just said? You know what? I haven't always done this, but now that I'm looking at the data and the stats, I'm going to be in compliance from now on because it's just not worth it. I want to come home to my family tonight. I want my crew to go home to their family. So working with TikTokers and, folks on Meta, across the Meta platform, be on YouTube here in a little bit, but it's hard. I think it's hard to also get to folks who are non-compliant, right? A lot of the work that 811 centers do relies on the databases you have of folks who have submitted tickets, right? So getting to that population of folks who we don't already talk to is tough. And I am always interested, and one of the things I love about the 811 world and we'll call it collaboration, not stealing ideas. That we do is seeing different ways that 811 centers, facility owner operators try to get to those populations of folks we aren't talking to all the time at trainings and things like that.
Sometimes I try to give more random or spontaneous analogies. And I was at a safety meeting the other day, and I grabbed a six-pack ring, right? The plastic rings that like six-packs of Coca-Cola cans are in or whatever. And I just held it up. I was like, hey, what do I do with this before I throw it away? And I was like, oh, you cut the rings, right? I live in Oklahoma, right? Oklahoma, if anybody is not geographically aware, we are totally landlocked, right? There is no ocean front on Oklahoma. And yet we, as a collective, me and this 50 people I was in front of, all knew to cut these rings. And I asked them why, and they're like, because it affects sea turtles and all this other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but why are we still doing it when it's so far away? What are the chances of this ring doing that? And I'm like, oh, very, very little. And we all know this, but we all do it. And I'm like, cool. Now you know the risk of damaging something without a locate request may or may not happen. I can't tell you one way or the other, but it could happen. So just like we're cutting the rings for the six-pack, we need to make that call every single time. And it was comical to me because I wanted to relate to something that has nothing to do with digging, but look at their behavior. We were trained, and I do it too. I've never thrown away a whole six-pack ring. I don't, since I was like 10. You just don't. And so to me, I'm like, that's that behavior study that got me thinking. I'm like, if we can convince everybody to care about 811 like we do sea turtles, we are set.
Yes, that's such a great point. And I love the other thing I love about having these kinds of conversations is that I can collaborate. I don't know, I'll have to think of a better spin on that. But I'm going to take that story, I'm going to take that analogy, and I'm going to use it as well, for sure. And my big hope is that 10 years from now, when we have in some places, a 60-year one-call program, we might not have had 811 for 60 years, that is kind of the level of awareness, even among the general public, that folks have about underground infrastructure and keeping ourselves safe.
Yeah, I don't know what got me going on that analogy, but it was comical. But like you said, I think it can eventually just become as commonplace as seatbelts, brushing your teeth, or cutting those rings. There's no reason for it not to be. We just need to, in my opinion, this is MG, not necessarily OK1 in this moment, listeners, but in my opinion, if we can just get excavator industry to slow down in a more intentional way. And what I mean by that is if the one-offs is always, I need to get a job done, if we can just get that culture to go, we need to get that job done safely. And if we can just throw that word in there and get them to go, yeah, I do need to wait for those lines to be marked. Yes, this is a process, and this is just part of doing business in this industry. And I think we can get there. And that's really what that mindset needs to switch.
I totally agree that we can get there, should get there. We also have work to do as an industry to restore that confidence in the 811 system so that we're delivering when, not you and I, obviously, but so that, accurate locates are on the ground. And as much as I feel so strongly about the human case for 811 and our community, the impacts on our communities, the business case is definitely there also, right? And the more that we as an industry, I think, are able to make that case to folks that investing upfront in safety is going to ultimately have better business outcomes for you, certainly in this country, that goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. It's unfortunately sometimes we have to remind people of the dollar signs to make them remember about someone's heart and well-being.
Vital signs. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Dollar signs as opposed to vital signs. So Kelly, one of the things that I really like about 811 in general, obviously we had the phone number, and in that time that communication method was necessary. I always tell people most states notification centers are called one call systems, right? And as the full legal name, OK811 is Oklahoma One Call System Incorporated. And I always talk about in 1979 when these 14 companies came together, their marketing genius was to say, we want one call made to talk to all 14 of us. And that's how it got named. And so those phone calls in 1979, or let's go way back to 2011. Wait, when did the number come around? I just messed up.
2007.
I was so close. In 2007. So when the number came around in 2007, we still needed an easy way to communicate to a large number of people. And now when I talk about using 811, I say contact, I say go to our website, click, all these other things. And I really like how there's been this evolution of, let's centralize where everything's going to, but now let's use this process by different methods. And the whole 811 going from a phone number to a verb has been really, really cool. I like saying that I'm part of 811 instead of telling people to call 811. Can you speak a little bit about how you've seen that evolution and what your take on it is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even as recently as probably 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot more, and there's still kind of a variation across the country of terminology, call to action words, I guess, that 811 centers use. But in that time, I think we have many of us have coalesced around contact, or just the more succinct and relying on the extremely high level of awareness, particularly that 811 has among professional contractors and excavators, using 811 as a dig. as a dig, using 811 as a verb. So, the URL that we are driving folks to for digital campaigns, for example, is no longer call811.com. It is 811beforeyoudig.com. And there's the awareness play. There's the fact that we're able to do that because for the power users of the 811 system, they're very well aware of what 811 is. And I think it's also equally important that every state still does have that pick up the phone option for folks, because we see a lot of smaller, and I'm sure your data probably reflects this as well, smaller excavators will tend to use the phone system more. Phone users of the 811 system tend to skew demographically older, for example, and we also tend to see more damages among smaller or mid-sized construction, landscaping, fencing organizations, which might not have some of the training infrastructure that, your facility owner operators or massive multi-state construction entities will have. So important, I think, to still have both options there. And in fact, one of the TikTok influencers that our education committee worked with recently said, I do call, and I kind of want to, I'll say contact for you at the end, but I would sort of like to represent, he said, you wanted me to be authentic. This is authentically how I use the system.
Okay.
There are those folks who still want to just have a human being that they chat with, but the evolution in the percentage of tickets that are online now versus voice has been monumental in the last decade. And technology is such a part of what I think needs to be imperative in our mission as damage prevention professionals over the next 5 years, because it's, I feel like we're late adopters sometimes in our industry of some basic technologies, probably not just using tickets, but when we think about mapping, for example, and the ways that facility mapping could impact some of our locating accuracy and timelines, and even, we mentioned the tech that's available for excavators these days is far and away better than what they had 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But there's also technology, bucket-enabled GPS that can stop you from, there's all sorts of technology that we haven't yet implemented everywhere because, of course, things are expensive. Those investments require justification. But the more that we can get tech all across 811, the better. The way that internet ticketing gives us really granular data on usage of the system is so helpful for us as we look to kind of accommodate the volume of locate requests right now. But yes, 811 as a verb, I think, is a testament to, the 20 years of work that this industry has been doing.
Yeah, I agree. I was late to understanding what 811 was. I started with Oki 11 years ago, so I'm in my 12th year. So 15 years ago, let's say, I had no clue what this was all about. I didn't know what flags and paint meant. I'm just an average guy who didn't have a shovel and lived in apartments, and that just wasn't part of my world. And to be in this now just blows me away. But one of my takeaways is I love the evolution of the damage prevention industry, because it's kind of like if someone becomes a football fan late in life, they can pick up a book and see what the 1972 Super Bowl was all like, right? So similar with damage prevention, even though I came to it late, I can see where we've come from and look at some of the past technologies that were being used and see that at one time mapping for Oklahoma was nothing more than quarter sections. And we're like, hey, they're in there somewhere. And a quarter section is a half mile by half mile square. We're like, yep, you'll get a phone call from somebody, and we send off pigeons and all this other stuff, right? So there has been a little bit of evolution, because we went from that archaic, for no better word that I can think of right now, style to now we're producing last year we did a little bit over 1 million tickets, which is huge for us. When 5 years ago 3/4 or 750,000 was a lot for us. So now we're finally over 1 million. We're doing really, really great things, and over 75% of those locate requests are being submitted online. And what we're finding is those phone calls are so much tougher to take, because think about this from an operation standpoint, right? For a phone call is going to be done by somebody who isn't tech savvy, who probably doesn't have a comfortable feel for mapping online and doing all that stuff. So that means the phone call is going to be more educational, a lot more customer service, a lot slower just because it's new to somebody, or it's just not on the same tech level. And then we're literally playing the telephone game with somebody, right? Did you mean 1/4 of a mile past that intersection, or did you mean 1/3 of a mile or 1/8 of a mile, whatever the case may be, right? And so we know as an industry that online submissions are more accurate and safer as a whole, because there's no chance for interpretation. That excavator is literally drawing where they're going to be working. And when you're on the phone and you're talking to somebody who isn't as tech savvy or doesn't trust online maps or whatever the case may be, we strive and we want to get as accurate of a ticket as possible, but we know just as an industry, it's just not going to be as good as what's online. So we push and ask for that opportunity for them to do it themselves because of that.
Yeah, that's the efficiency piece that introduces, from who gets notified to the locator's jobs on site, is huge. So that is, I'm sure, a massive reason why the industry has sort of gone that way in general. And some states are, over 90% of their ticket volume is going that way. So, and I think too, again, to tie back to sort of the technology piece, the mapping piece, I mean, the way that it allows 811 centers too to work with your members, your facility owner operators, to obviously be safe and within the letter of the law, but look at some of the buffers that they can create for themselves, and how those impact their ability to get locates done on time and accurately, but also only ones that are truly necessary when we are in at least a national situation where as often as 56% of the time, folks are not able to start their jobs on time because of late locates. Yeah. Helps us kind of meet the needs of today, for sure.
Yeah, I've noticed that, and CGA has thrown out some communication in the last year about helping to reduce waste. I don't think we've forgotten that, because we've already seen improvement here in Oklahoma, but I know we're also focusing on 50 and 5, but that reducing the waste, that communication piece has been great. We have gone out ahead of these excavators and said, hey, you do not need 20 jobs that you cannot possibly get to. What about the 5 that you can, or maybe? And that's helped tremendously. Also, Oklahoma is one of the few states that I know of that has some wording in the law now for repercussions for excessive and unreasonable locates.
Really?
Yeah, Oklahoma within our law there's two lines that are important. One is a operator has the ability to recoup costs for unreasonable and excessive locate requests by an excavator. So our training is pretty simple. Every time someone puts in a locate request, we ask when they think that project's going to be done, right? So an electric co-op calls, they say they're going to be putting up electric poles and they'll be finished by September 1st, right? Fully legit, makes sense. That's 3 months or 2 months, that's math, 2 months of locate requests, right? And in Oklahoma, our tickets are good for 14 days. So 2 a month-ish. So if that's the case, there should be 4 tickets. On that 5th ticket, if they're not done and they can't justify weather, parts, or reason for these delays, those locators or the locating companies could be like, hey, this is excessive and unreasonable, and recoup costs for that after the project should be done. So to my knowledge, this has never happened in the year and a half that it's been available. I think the ecosystem out there makes it really tough to go, hey, I want to recoup the cost for me locating for you, but also I want to hire you to do work for me in a couple of months. So that makes it a little difficult, but it's a good barking point and a leverage point. If you can bark and say, hey, just let this drop and call us back when you are doing work, that is better than wasting my time. And then that leverage comes across. And then the other part of our law about unreasonable or fraudulent locate requests is emergency response or emergency requests. Yes. And it says pretty straightforward for fraudulent emergency requests that operators can recoup costs for that. And we've seen a huge reduction in emergencies. So either A, we're living the good life and nothing's bad's happening, or they're realizing that, hey, not everything's an emergency. And we've seen a decrease in emergency requests since that. So I do suggest other states look at that, at least have a leverage point to say, hey, you're wasting our stuff. And this is making it where we're inhibiting being able to locate other projects that are ongoing.
Yeah, it's such a important point, I think, for us to make to the professional contracting, excavating community that, this is a change in an effort to better serve them exactly when they would like to have their marks, their locates marked out. And I also think it is really important. It's very helpful to have even just a leverage point. And that's interesting. So that's relatively new in your law.
Yeah, that got added, I want to say 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, if not.
Oh, I'm very interested to keep an eye on that. And do you find that on the next, CGA has a program called the Next Practices Initiative, which is our effort to expand, to innovate beyond best practices and kind of identify the next generation of best practices. And some of the data analysis that we've done for that initiative has shown that facility owner operators are typically massive drivers of some of the waste or the over notification in the system. And I mean, it's generally some of their subcontractors. So kind of to the point you made earlier, but that if we were able to rein in some of our own folks, I think that would make a huge impact on system volume as well.
Yeah. And one aspect of 811 is I talk about it being a community. It's not operators versus contractors, right? Or excavators versus utilities. Because if it was that, the whole system would fail immediately. And I know you've heard this story, but one of my first ever presentations, I was with an excavation company doing a safety talk, and I went into the importance of tolerance zone and not using heavy equipment there and all that stuff. Wrapped up the meeting, and I found out the reason that I got asked to come and speak about the tolerance zone specifically is because they lost a coworker a few months before due to a bad accident, being in the wrong spot at the wrong time with heavy equipment, right? And ever since then, the conversations aren't, hey, I need you not to hit anything. It's, hey, I need to get you home so you can come back to work tomorrow. And once that perspective changed and that messaging has changed, we've seen a huge difference in the field. Now, obviously, I haven't touched all 1 million people who have put in locate requests, right? But if I can remind them that this community is really taking care of each other, we're taking care of bottom lines of companies who are providing products and services through damage prevention, but more importantly, because all that can still be repaired and restored. So more importantly is the things that can't be repaired and restored, and that's the excavator or the worker who's putting themselves in that risk when they do their job every day. And if we can do one thing to make it easier, and that's 811, then we're going to do all we can. And I think that messaging has helped, at least in front of the people that I'm in front of, just to let them know the community is there to take care of each other. There's nobody pointing fingers about what's wrong. We need to just pursue what's right.
Such a great point. And we have, we've talked a little bit about that energy, that community spirit and damage prevention. And when you're able to bring excavator, folks who are in the field, kind of in direct contact sometimes with the folks that they are, or the entities that they're frustrated with, you really make progress. So I live in Maryland, and for many years attended the Misutility damage prevention committee meetings on a monthly basis. And you'd have folks coming in, pretty fired up about not getting their locates or getting double billed by a certain large provider after not even having damaged their line. And they would leave the meeting with, kind of dapping up the person they thought that they were frustrated with, because this is a human industry at the end of the day. And everybody that I have ever encountered in damage prevention is here to protect lives and communities. This is literally life-saving, community sustaining work. And yes, we all work for organizations that have a bottom line, right? But when we're able to bring people into the community and not have them feeling like they're siloed and nobody cares about their concerns, I think we're really able to make progress. And again, I think the way that everybody across the country has been able to pull in the excavator community over the last decade has made a big impact.
Yeah, I often joke about how my job is this ambassador role, right? Because obviously my member companies, that's our board. That's where the funding comes from. We're member-funded nonprofit, as most one call systems are. And so my goal is to make sure that I'm making them happy in my presentation and my training style and getting people on board to use the system. But at the same time, and every member company is on board with me saying this, they care more about the excavator than their own product, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said earlier, that could be repaired or restored. If we know that every excavator is doing everything they can to stay safe, then the damage is going to be reduced just because the better practices are being used, if not the best practices, right? So that'll keep them away from the damages from happening. So when you look at CGA, because we've talked about the past, we're kind of talking about where we are right now. Let's talk about the future, right? You talked about a couple different things that's taking place. We see some technology out there, but I really want to go back to the communication stuff, because that's definitely our wheelhouse, right? We talked about the influencers. Do you want to do a deeper dive in some of the new stuff that's coming up?
Sure. One project that I'm super excited about and that CGA has been working very diligently on for well over a year now is a new excavator education curriculum that's going to be available online. We're going to be launching some of the first modules this fall. There's a task team from our education committee, but also that has pulled in. It's a very cross-collaborative team, because we need specifically a ton of excavators to review the material and give us feedback on it. But it's going to be a real game changer, I think, for U.S. damage prevention, because training is, I mentioned earlier, we see some correlations with smaller firms having less training available, less training infrastructure. Many 811 centers offer excellent training, and many have online training platforms as well, which are amazing. Yay. There's also firms, though, that work across state lines, and that there's just a huge appetite for some online resource that anybody in the country can visit to learn more about what is hand digging, some of these kind of foundational concepts in excavation best practices around damage prevention. So I'm very, very excited about that. On the next practices front, the mapping work that so many members are doing and that we're trying to document at the CGA level and share with others, I just can't emphasize what, in my mind anyway, a panacea it is for some of the issues that we have in damage prevention. Barb Cederberg at Gopher State One Call has done some amazing work with providing 811 ticket level facility map visualizations to locators, excavators, that I think is really important. They're also doing a really cool program where the 811 Center has purchased several RTK, like GPS enabled locating devices that they are lending out to municipalities
Very
for
cool.
months at a time to help them map their infrastructure, to locate, obviously, but also kind of double function and
Yeah.
map infrastructure and make those really important updates. The hardest part about mapping is that it's an expensive undertaking, whether you're, looking at it from the 811 center level or a facility owner operator perspective. It's not cheap. So we're going to be launching a video interview series. I don't know if I will achieve your level of fame, MG, and hopefully my face will not be on it at all, but really kind of profiling leaders at organizations that have made these mapping investments and trying to get the C-suite on board with this needs to happen. Here are some ways you could think about funding it. Those are kind of my big excitements over the next year. But also CGA is looking forward to our 25th anniversary next year.
Yeah.
So we'll be celebrating that we're going to be having a big party, obviously, at our 2025 CGA conference and expo, which will be April 7th through 10th in Orlando at the World Center Marriott. So I hope everybody can come join us for that.
Everybody?
That's everybody. Everybody. We hit, I think, over 1,400 attendees at this year's conference. So
that is awesome.
Sky's the limit for next year.
If everybody brings a friend, let's do it.
That's right.
We'll get it close to 3,000. Let's do it.
That's right. Orlando can handle it.
Yeah, Orlando's a great place. You've had conferences there. I've been there before, and it's with all the amenities that are there, and then of course the great programming that CGA puts together for the conference. I love it. So I'm looking forward to it. I'll be there for sure. So
that's where we first met, was at a CGA conference, as I think you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to figure out if it was Tampa or if it was West Coast, but I can't remember. But
I couldn't remember. I was also trying to recall before our conversation. I cannot remember. I know it was at the night of networking.
Yes, of course. So listeners, if you would like to meet Kelly as well, come to CGA in April of next year, and we'll have a blast. So with that, we are kind of running up against the time, so I don't want to keep you longer. I know you have more stuff to do. I want to say that with all the stuff that you're talking about with the future of CGA and the communication and different stuff, I'm excited. I saw some snippets of the excavator education stuff that's out there. I think it's great. I'm very proud of Oklahoma's online training, but as a supplemental tool or to our excavators who would like independent training outside of us, it is a great wealth of knowledge. So I think it'll be great. We'll be promoting it as something in addition to or to supplement what we have. I know that we already have plans for that. And then I do want to keep working with you when it comes to ideas, when it comes to the influencer stuff, especially, and any other aspect that I can help out with. So keep us informed. I know Oklahoma loves to be a part of anything that's new when it comes to the damage prevention world.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your partnership at Okie 811, and I personally appreciate just getting to chat and exchange ideas whenever we are able.
Provided in partnership with Damage Prevention Academy, Okie 811's Excavator Education Program is certified by the Gold Shovel Standard. Upon completion of this training, you will be educated in the regulations surrounding excavation in Oklahoma and the best practices for safe digging and damage prevention. Okie 811 certified excavators can rely on this high-quality online training, which specifically incorporates everything they need to know for the prevention of damage to critical buried infrastructure, as well as increased public and workforce safety. The training will take approximately 2 hours to complete. The training is fully responsive, mobile enabled, and can be completed on a desktop, laptop, tablet, or other mobile device as your schedule allows. The Okie 811 Damage Prevention Certification is a proactive indication of an increased investment in damage prevention to drive safety, reduce damages, and minimize the risks associated with excavating on or around buried assets. Once you have successfully completed the training and exam, you will receive a certificate of achievement, including the Gold Shovel Standard Seal. To get Oki 811 certified, go to oki811.org/excavation certification.
Kelly, it's been awesome talking with you today. I've liked knowing more and more about CGA. Like I said, like we've said, it's an organization that kind of brought all this damage prevention efforts into one spot, so we can kind of look at it together and then distribute it in the best way possible, whether it's the messaging or the process or the best practices. All those things are really, really important, and CGA has kind of been that hub to help all of us have some be headed in the same direction. And your role has a huge influence on that, making sure that we're all on the same page and doing that. So I want to let you know that I, from a distance, know how hard you work, and I see all the great things you're doing. So I want to say thanks for that. And before you get out of here, what is your big message that you want for the industry before we take off?
Well, thank you, first of all, very much. I appreciate so much the conversation with you anytime we're able to have one. And CGA really appreciates Oki 811's partnership on all things damage prevention, particularly your activity in the state legislatures, which we heard a little bit about at the last OCSI meeting. My big message for the industry would be get your leadership bought in. Obviously your leadership spot in, but when we look at facility owner operators, locating, engineering design, we need your C-suite involved in damage prevention. We need them to understand that investing in damage prevention is ultimately good for their bottom line, and that it saves lives. These investments on the front end save us money and heartache on the back end. So get leadership bought in.
Exactly. Let's worry about vital signs in addition to dollar signs.
Amen.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, it was a pleasure. To our listeners, if you haven't already, please like and follow and subscribe and click all the buttons. Just click them all and share us with others that are in the industry, that we can continue to promote safe digging and damage prevention in Oklahoma. And until next time, keep digging deep, and thank you for joining us. Have a great day.